All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're tuning into this one, just like the last one, you probably are looking to change your oil and want a couple tips and tricks. This vehicle is a little bit of a pain in the neck to change the oil on, so I'll try to make it a little bit easier for you. So first thing you're gonna need, obviously, is some tools and oil. So this is the oil I used. You're gonna need to buy yourself 5 quarts of whatever your preference is, 10W40. And I went with the full synthetic AMS oil. That's what I use in all my stuff. Just like the gear oil and the transmission fluid, same thing. For the tranny and the gear oil, I think I showed you guys in the last video, but if you didn't see it, for the differential fluid changes, I use this stuff here. This machine calls for 80W90 for the transmission and both differentials. So this is 7590, which is basically all you're gonna find in synthetic. If you're gonna go with standard oil, non-synthetic, you know, it'll come up in 80W90, but 7590 is the same thing if you go in synthetic. So I did the front differential, rear differential yesterday. If you guys haven't seen that video, you can check it out if you're interested. This is for the engine oil change and the transmission fluid change. So transmission fluid, we'll start with that. That was actually a piece of cake, easiest of all of the fluids to change. We're going to get underneath. I'll show you the drain plug for that. Let me get the light. So directly lined up with the fill, you'll see right there, that cap. So right in front of your seatbelt is the rubber cap. Now your fill, your check and your fill for your transmission is right there. So directly in line with that, underneath, you're going to find one 12mm bolt. All right. So see if it's right here. So it's, if you're looking back, it's about from where the beveled edge is from the bottom of the skid, it's about a hand's width. So right here, this round one, 12mm, you pull that, drain it, no problems. It'll all drain out. Pull the dipstick, let it drain fully till it stops dripping. And then on this machine, seat pops out nice and easy. So you're just gonna pop the seat bottom off, you pull it off from the front. And then right here is where your drain, your fill and your check stick is, right there. You'll see an arrow on it. When you insert the dipstick, the manual tells you to point the arrow out. In other words, facing the door. This is on the passenger side, so the arrow will be facing the passenger door. So when you pull it, there's hash marks, just like, you know, checking your engine oil. That's pretty self-explanatory. It took pretty much what the book called for, which was just under 1.5 quarts of the transmission fluid, which in this case was 75W90 AMS oil. So you check that cold. So when you fill it up, you can check it immediately, you know, let it settle for a second, obviously. And then you can check it, top it off, you know, get it to the top of the hash marks on the stick, and you're good. Let me show you guys, just in case you're not sure what I'm talking about, but pretty self-explanatory. You can see the hash marks. The oil's so clean, it's kind of hard to tell, but if you look at it from the back side, if we get this thing to steady, you'll see it's at the top of the hash marks. Now, you'll see on my dipstick, this is a little trick for you, actually. Well, I got this out. It's good that I'm glad I pulled it out. Sometimes when you change your fluid, it's so clean, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell if it's over the hash mark sometimes. So what I do is I take a little sandpaper, and I do this on a lot of my vehicles, and I'll just put some cross hatches on the smooth surface. So you see the dipstick's pretty smooth. So what that'll do is that'll give you a more accurate level. You'll be able to read it better because the oil is going to, you know, hang on to the crosshatch sand marks from the sandpaper, and you're going to be able to read the oil better on the dipstick. So I do that on a lot of my on a lot of dipsticks. I've had cars in the past where you check the oil and the dipstick is so slippery and glossy that the oil just slides right off. By the time you pull the dipstick up, the oil's kind of like scattered on the dipstick. It's hard to get a real line and an accurate reading. So I do that. And then engine oil. So that's transmission fluid. Transmission fluid is piece of cake. So engine oil, totally different story. Unfortunately, it's not a hard job. I would say it's just time consuming. Probably like an hour to change the oil on this thing. And the reason why is because there's like about 5 places to drain the oil from. It's 5 drain plugs on this machine. So from the top, you're going to start, remove your, now this is the 4-seater. So obviously it's going to be different than a 2-seater. On a 2-seater, you're just going to lift the bed. You're going to have your lever over there. You're going to lift the bed, and then your engine's going to be exposed underneath just like this. On the 4-seater, you're just going to take the engine cover off. Engine cover just has 5 clips right here. You're going to pull out the side. There's the engine cover right there. You can see it. It's got some heavy insulation in there. Pretty thick insulation. Probably one of the reasons why it doesn't really get much engine heat. They really did a good job insulating it. But anyway, you're going to pull that off. Then you'll have your oil fill cap on the head, on your valve cover. You're going to take that off. Clean up around it first so you don't drop any dirt in there. And then you have your oil tank. This is a dry sump system, so I'll explain what that is in a minute. So then you have your oil tank. You're going to take the drain, the check stick out of there, dipstick, pull that out, set it aside, wipe it off. Same thing with the cap, set it aside. Then we're going to go underneath again, and you're going to drain the oil from 5 different places. So you're going to drain the oil from the tank. That's a pretty easy one right there. You see that bolt with the blue on it? That's the oil tank where the dipstick goes. You're going to drain that one first. That's what the book says anyway. You could probably drain your engine first and then the tank. I don't think it makes a difference. But I drained the tank. It was pretty easy. Didn't make much of a mess. It caught a little bit of oil on the edge there of the frame, but it doesn't run all over the place. It pretty much stays there. You can wipe it off. No problem. Doesn't run all over. So then you'll tighten that back up. Don't make these drain plugs tight. Everything on this machine is aluminum. So you're just going to strip the hell out of it if you're cranking on them. Just snug is all you want them. That's 12 millimeter, that one. I'm sorry, 10 millimeter. That's a 10 millimeter drain plug, so you're going to need 10 millimeter for that. Then what you're going to do is we're going to go onto the machine again, and you're going to be under the machine for a while. What I did was I drained one section, walked away, did some things, came back when it was done dripping. So after you're done the oil tank, now we're going to come under the machine here, and you'll see this. You'll see the various holes on the skid plate on the bottom. You'll see the one oblong one. It's a little more from center of the machine, closer towards the passenger side. And if you look underneath here, all right, you'll see a bunch of bolts, but the ones you want are the 2 12 millimeters. So you got that one there and that one there. You're gonna pull both of those, drain the engine. All right, that's gonna take a little bit. Let it drain fully till they stop dripping, wipe them off. Obviously make sure your crush washers are still on the bolts, and then tighten it back up. Then from there, which is where we were right here, once that's empty, so now that's 3 drain bolts. I told you got 5. We're gonna work our way towards the front. All right, now towards the front of the machine here, just past the front section, right when the body of the machine gets a little fatter, you're gonna come over here to this other oblong one. It's pretty much directly next to the square one. Right here, you can see what I'm talking about already. There's these oil drain lines, the oil cooler lines, and there's drain bolts in there. Those are 8 millimeter. So you're gonna need a 12, a 10, and an 8 millimeter socket to do this job. Again, very delicately put them back in, snug, not over tight, because you're gonna strip them. They're just all aluminum lines. You got brass crush washers on there. So you're gonna pull both of those. That's gonna drain. That goes to, on this machine, you have an oil cooler, and that goes the oil cooler on this machine goes all the way to the front, sits in front of the radiator. So it's a pretty nice feature. It keeps the oil cooler, helps cool the motor too. So that's right behind your grill. You see, there's your oil cooler. Okay, it's a pretty big oil cooler. Your radiator's behind it. That one you first see when you look in the grill here on these RMAXs, that's the oil cooler. That's what those lines are going to. So you got to drain those lines so you get all the old oil out. You're still probably leaving a little bit of oil in the motor, I would think, with the length of those lines and running from the rear to the front of the machine. But just leave those plugs open until they're fully done dripping. Put them back in. Now, it's all pretty easy stuff, but it's just time consuming. You know, you got to let them all drain, close them back up, let the next ones drain. Unless you got 5 drain pans, which I don't, just one, so you can move it around. Last thing is I left the cover off. It's the oil filter. So that cover right there goes right here. The reason why you take that off, you don't really have to. I would imagine in the future, I might not have to. But the factory oil filter is on so darn tight. If you've done it already, you know what I'm talking about. But you almost have to be the Hulk to get the oil filter off. So I tried the oil filter wrenches. I had the cap that fits over the top. That didn't work. It was literally just stripping it, the top of the filter. It was just spinning. You just couldn't get enough of a grip on it. So even with the oil filter wrench that I have, I couldn't get it off. So what I did was I took a big pair of channel locks, come in through here, and then come in through here. And while laying under the machine, it was the easiest way to do it. So I'll take you under there and show you. But then you'll see the oil filter is right there. Okay? Those lines move. There's a zip tied there. That's the oil filter that comes out. And then there's a hole in the frame. The oil drains down there pretty good. You know, you're not going to make much of a mess. It drains out pretty well. That's one thing I got to say about this machine is it's a pain in the neck draining all these spots and getting to the oil filter and getting it off a little bit, but it doesn't make much of a mess. All the fluids pretty much drain out pretty well. They give you pretty good access for that stuff. So now again, keep in mind it's the 4-seater on 2-seater. It's going to be similar, but a little easier to get to with the bed lifted up. So here's the big hole right next to the opening. And if you look up, you'll see the oil filter's right there. So now you can come in through the side here, you'll see. But if you don't have the cover on, you really can't get it out from the front right here, which is where you can move these lines and then you can pull it out. Now I anticipate my next oil change, I may not have to take that plastic cover off because, you know, I didn't put it on with the strength of Superman. I just did it snug like you're supposed to. For some reason from the factory, these oil filters, and it's not just this machine. My Polaris Razor was the same thing. Getting the oil filter off was a disaster. The one from the factory, but so now you got all the oil out. You got the filter off. You got the new filter on. Now we're gonna fill up the oil. This is another process in itself because some people don't understand what a dry sump is versus a wet sump, and they're super confused. Goes against all logic for them. They're used to checking the oil on their car, and it may be somebody that's watching this video right now. If you're used to checking the oil on your car, you know you check it when it's cold. All the oil's in your drain pan, and you check your oil before you leave for the day or before you go on a trip. The oil's cold, you park it on a level surface. That's it. That's all you need to do. Super simple. This is a dry sump, totally different. What that means is, I showed you already, you got the oil tank, and then you have the cap on the valve cover to put the oil into the engine. So the reason for that is, being called a dry sump, basically the tank holds a lot of the oil when your machine is running and at operating temperature, okay? Yamaha does this on all their off-road vehicles. There's other manufacturers that do it too. I had a 2006 Kawasaki Brute Force, was set up the same way, had a dry sump. So it's a little bit of a different process checking the oil. So what you're gonna do is, the book says to start with, now the machine takes dry with a filter change 4.38 quarts of oil. So that's a little, almost 4.5 quarts, more like 4 1/3 quart of oil. Takes a lot of oil for a side-by-side, but that's a good thing. So what the book says to do is add 1.5 quarts into the top of the engine. Put the cap back on. So right there in the valve cover, add 1.5 quarts directly to the engine. Then put about 2 quarts in the tank. Start it, run it till operating temperature. Shut it off. Let it sit for 10 minutes. Pull the dipstick. Wipe it clean. Insert the dipstick back in the tank. Do not screw the dipstick in. Just insert it till it stops. Pull it out. Check the level. I will tell you right now, there's a good chance if you do it that way, the way the book says, when you first check the oil, the dipstick's going to be bone dry. Because if you do some math, it's got you putting in 3 3/4 quart oil. So not even 4 quarts. I would personally start with 4 quarts. And the reason I think it tells you to do that is because they don't want you overfilling it either. And if you didn't do the process complete, like I showed you, with draining everything, you're going to have still a little bit of oil left in your engine. And you're going to overfill the oil if you just put 4.3 quarts of oil, 4.39 quarts of oil in there and run it. It's probably going to be way over full. So I started with 4. Let it run to operating temperature. Shut it off. Let it sit for 10 minutes, like it said. Check the oil. It was a little bit low. It was just to the bottom of the dipstick. So I brought it up till I did the full amount. Figured that'll be good because I was at 4 quarts. It was barely touching the dipstick. Went to 4 3/4, 4.39, whatever it is, the book says. So added that, the rest started, let it run, circulate a minute, shut it down, let it sit, checked it again. It was a little bit overfull. So I had to take that pump that I have to pump the gear oil into the differentials and just pumped 1 ounce or 2 out of the tank. At that point, it was good. So I let it sit for a while, started it again, let it idle for a few minutes, shut it down, let it sit 10 minutes, checked it, it's good. It's at the top of the full mark. So when I say don't screw it in, I mean do not screw it in to check it. It's screwed in now. When you check the oil, you unscrew it. Now, you're going to need tiny hands to get in here, unfortunately. If you got monster hands, you're going to have a problem with these 4-seaters, getting your hand between the plastic and the oil tank. So when you take it out, right, now it's unscrewed. You can take it out, wipe the dipstick, put it back in until it sits on the top. That's it. You're not screwing it in. Sit it there, pull it out, check it, the level on the hash marks, right? And then if you're good, great. Put it back in, screw it in, and we're good. So that is that. Bit of a process, as you can see. Now, take your time. Don't rush. Don't get frustrated. It is what it is, okay? The first oil change, they say to do 150 miles or 15 hours. I have 219 miles on my machine, and we're doing the first fluid changes. I thought it was about 190, but when I checked just a little while ago to document it, it was actually about 219, 214 or something like that. But I only have 13.1 hours on the machine. So you're not even at that 15-hour mark, which the engine is what needs the 15 hours to get fully broken in. So I'm about 13.1, but the mileage is a little over. So give or take, if you get to 200 miles, you're good. I wouldn't go over that. I wouldn't go to 300, 400 for your first oil change. But the oil came out very clean. Unlike the differentials, which came out pretty dark, which I talked about in my last video. Same thing with the transmission fluid, came out fairly clean. A little bit cloudy, not bad at all, though. Nothing like the front and rear differential. Rear differential was the worst. But like I said, take your time. The book also is I'll give you another little tip. So the book also is a little bit confusing as far as what's operating temperature. So operating temperature to me means the temperature that it normally operates in, which for these machines is about 195, 200. So there's 2 sections in the book which tell you checking the oil level. One in the beginning of the oil change section and then one at the end. If you read the section in the beginning, it tells you get it to the oil temperature is at 140. Now, that's a little bit of a misdirect because you can't measure the oil temperature on these machines. You can only measure the coolant temperature, which is the engine temperature. The oil temperature sometimes varies from the coolant temperature. So the oil may not necessarily be warm enough. So I did to the 140, which was suggested by the book, assuming they meant the engine temperature, because there's no way to check the oil temperature on these. And you couldn't get an accurate reading. So I did it like I do on my Yamaha Raptor, which is, it's also a Yamaha product. It's the same type of system. You got a dry sump. I run it till the fan kicks on, which is operating temperature. Shut it down, let it sit a couple minutes, then check the oil as I showed you, and you'll get an accurate reading. The reason why you want the oil warm to operating temperature, besides it's not just a matter of letting it run and letting it circulate through and balancing out between the tank and the engine and getting the oil throughout in the new filter, back through the oil lines into the oil cooler, but also when oil warms up, it expands. So it's gonna read more when the oil is warm. If you check it cold, it's been sitting, the oil's draining back into the engine, it's not all in the tank, and it hasn't had time to expand yet either. So just my advice, to check the oil after the oil change. It should be cold anyway, but if you're periodically checking your oil on these machines, after it's been sitting overnight, before you go for a ride, say one day, start it up, let it get to operating temperature. I say about you get to 180, 185, you're fine. Shut it off, let it sit for 10 minutes, check your oil. That'll give you a good indication. If it's on the hashtags, as long as it's, in the middle of the hash marks on the dipstick, you're good. There's no reason to overthink this, all right? So again, a little over 4 quarts of oil is what I ended up using. It's going to vary for everybody. It really depends on how well you let it drain out. All those oil drains drain. If you're rushing and you're like you let the oil come out while it's heavy, and then as soon as it starts trickling, you plug it up. If you do that for all of them, you're going to be leaving a lot of oil in there. I let it sit till there was absolutely not a single drip coming out of any of those drain plugs. And I took just about as much as the book said to fill up the oil and get a full mark. So I'll recheck it again in the morning. Once it's been sitting overnight, I'll start it. Let's get the operating temperature and check it again one more time before I put the engine cover back on. But that's it, super easy. Well, I got you in here. I'll show you a little mod I did. I did this right away when I got the machine. Many of you might not know about it, but you see right here, it says well erasing. That is an air injection delete, okay? With the EPA and all that stuff, smog control, they put an air injection system on these things to keep the EPA happy. So basically what it does is it shows that it makes the machine run a little leaner, okay? So if you delete that, that's going to help with your cold starts. When you get a lean cold start, it's going to be hard enough to start the machine when it's cold. So when it's running lean, it's going to be even harder. So it helps with that. I don't have really that issue here in Arizona. It doesn't get cold. We don't get no 0 degrees days, so I don't really have to deal with that. But it's gonna help the machine run a little bit better. So it's like a $20 kit, not even. So they give you a little bill of cap. I'll show you the old one. I saved it. I got it on my tool bench. And then there's a hose that comes off of it, and that hose goes to right here, right where this air injection pump is. And the hose comes right up here. They give you a rubber nipple. You put that over there, zip tie it on, so it's tight and doesn't move, and you're good. I did the same thing on my Yamaha Raptor. I got an air injection delete kit on that. That's how a lot of the machines are now. Can-Am does the same thing with some of their machines. So this is the piece I'm talking about. Let me get it for you. I got it up here, I believe. Yep. So it's right here. This is what you're taking off in the machine, and what that well erasing cap replaces. And then you'll see that's the hose that goes where you're going to block off on the air injection pump. So that's it. That's about all I could say about changing the oil. So like I said, take your time. Super easy job, just time consuming. Don't get frustrated. If you put at least 4 quarts of oil in there, you're safe. Start it, let it run. Put 2 in, put 2 in the motor, put 2 in the tank. Let it run to operating temperature. Shut it down. Check it. Top it off a little bit as needed to the full mark. You don't want to overfill it. If it's too much overfill, what's going to end up happening is when you're driving and the crankcase pressure, it's going to push that oil back. It's going to end up in your airbox. So the airbox on this machine is actually under the hood right here. So it's, if you take those 2 latches off and pop the hood, there's an airbox underneath there, underneath the hood. So you're going to end up with oil in your airbox if you overfill it. So you don't want to underfill it either, but you don't want to overfill it. You got to be in a safe zone. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope this helped somebody. I know it's a little bit of a frustrating situation if you never dealt with a dry sump system, but take your time, check it the right way. Don't rush. Don't just assume you have enough oil or assume you're good. Check your oil the correct way. Let the machine be cold, bring it up to operating temperature, shut it down, let it sit for 10 minutes, then check it. If you're good, you're good. Obviously too, what I did was after I idled it and I let it sit, then I went around underneath, checked all those drain bolts and the oil filter, make sure they weren't leaking and there was no oil seeping out of there. So I know, you're good. And that's it. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope, again, this helps somebody. If you don't follow us on Instagram, Odyssey_offroad on Instagram, give us a follow there. And we'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.